But what we find in Exodus 17 is they viciously attacked Israel at Rephidim shortly after the Exodus. They ambush Israel from behind. Now, this isn't all right here. You have to piece together what it says in Numbers and what it says in Deuteronomy. But specifically in Deuteronomy 25, it tells us that the Amalekites were so evil that they followed, kind of stalked like terrorists, the children of Israel, and they would see the old people and the sick people that kind of couldn't keep up with the caravan, and gradually the caravan of all the Exodus people were out in front, and they were kind of stumbling along, and they'd pick them off from behind. And they were just killing the weak and the elderly at the fringes of the camp and stealing and plundering them. Kind of like the lowest desperados is what they were. It was cowardly to attack these weak and elderly people when you are the most powerful and savage tribe in the whole region. And so these people were showing their heart. The Amalekites hated God and detested Israel. They seemed to delight in wicked and destructive acts. And so it happens in chapter 17, starting in verse 8. Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. And Moses said to Joshua, choose some of the men, go out and fight with Amalek. Now look at this. All of a sudden as you read this, something strange is happening. Instead of going to the command center and working out the strategy with Joshua of how to attack and, come this way and bring out our best weaponry, look what Moses does. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the rod of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses said to him and fought with Amalek. And Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. And so it was, verse 11, when Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed. And when he let down his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands became heavy. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. And Aaron and Hur supported his hands, one on one side, the other on the other side. And his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua defeated Amalek and his people with the edge of the sword. That's a cute little Sunday school story, isn't it? Isn't that an interesting story? We just kind of breeze right by that. But there's a lesson for us, because Amalek is specifically named as a descendant of a godless and profane, fornicacious, not needing God man who knew God, Esau. And his descendants met his brother's descendants and fought wickedly and viciously against them. Let's see what's going on here. Because as we examine the famous battle with Aaron and Hur supporting Moses' arms, the unusual way the Lord instructed Moses in the battle and the aftermath, we see something big is going on here. God only let Israel win when Moses' hands were raised. Now Paul gives us a little insight into that. In 1 Timothy 2:8, he says, I would that all men everywhere prayed, lifting holy hands. There's a connection between those hands raised and prayer, and seeking God and His power and His faithfulness and His might. And that's what the rod was in Moses' hand, a symbol of God's power. The truth from Exodus is that only God can give us victory. It wasn't the army of Israel. They didn't know anything about fighting. They were slaves and farmers and herdsmen. They didn't know how to use weapons. The reason that Israel defeated Amalek was not superior tactics. God gave them the victory. So it's a simple lesson. Look at verse 11. We need to believe that truth and by faith seek God's intervention. It came about when Moses held his hands up, Israel prevailed. God wanted to utterly destroy this nation of ferocious, plundering, merciless murderers with all their wickedness. And so God wanted to show He alone could destroy them. Israel was not powerful enough for that. What's going on? Basically, it's this. We're seeing two things. Sin left unchecked in Esau's life sired a whole nation of wickedness. That's one element. The other element is only God can defeat that. That's the message of chapter 17 of Exodus. In Genesis, Esau despised the blessing. Esau was proud and self-sufficient. He was profane and immoral. In a spiritual sense, Esau represents the flesh. His grandson Amalek becomes a biblical illustration of the flesh and the lifelong battle each of us will wage in our flesh.